It's November, it's Ferocious Cup time, which means it's time for Ryan Swag to do the Ferocious Cup Simplified video. As usual, this is following Lorma96's article on GamePress, the Ferocious Cup meta. If you want more details on these picks and the Pokemon, I absolutely recommend checking this article out. Link in the description. I'm just going to be giving you guys a basic overview of the meta to help you get started. Also, if you're this far in the video and you don't know what the Ferocious Cup is, it's the competitive format for PvP in Pokemon Go using the Silph Arena. If you want more details on the Silph Arena, go to silph.gg. So starting out, the Daddy Mac of the Ferocious Cup is obviously Umbreon. I mean, that's more basic than this video is, right? And of course, it's the Last Resort Umbreon. So if you don't have Last Resort Umbreon, you're kind of screwed over, in my opinion. There are a lot of arguments for using non-Last Resort Umbreon, but when I think about it, I think about all the issues. Without Last Resort, you not only lose the mirror, which is huge because Umbreon is the best Pokemon in this format, but you also lose to A-Rat, which isn't super common, and you lose to Skuntank, which is pretty dang common. On top of that, you also lose to Alolan Ninetales so badly that it is very likely that Alolan Ninetales will be able to get off 2 Psyshocks before going down to the next Pokemon. And that's not to mention all of the additional charm damage that the next Pokemon in will be taking from Alolan Ninetales. So honestly, it's pretty messed up that Silph didn't ban Umbreon just outright, if not just ban the Last Resort variant, but they didn't. That was their choice. We had weeks of protest before they came out with this, and it fell on deaf ears, so Umbreon. Now, if you do not have a Last Resort Umbreon, should you still include an Umbreon on your team, or should you replace it with Alolan Raticate? I honestly can't make that choice for you. It is a risky choice, because Umbreon is so tanky and so powerful that it's able to hammer out just every single neutral matchup in this whole entire meta. The unfortunate reality is that loses Zamir, loses Omega Hard to the Fairy types, and loses to Skuntank. Those are the risks that you have to be aware of. As far as Alolan Raticate goes as a replacement, it is softer than Umbreon is, so it's not able to handle as many neutral matchups, and it still loses to the Fairy types, of course, and it loses to the Last Resort Umbreon still, of course. So, yeah. I feel like if you are going to go for the Alolan Raticate, definitely meme it up with the Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam could let you turn the tables on a Last Resort Umbreon if they don't shield it. And then on top of that, it does cause an interesting situation to happen with the Ninetales there. Basically, Alolan Raticate dies so fast to Alolan Ninetales that it's not able to reach double Psyshock. And then on top of that, if they don't shield your Hyper Beam, then they get knocked out, which is also a win. So yeah, we're in a cup where dying fast is an advantage. I just want to make that clear. This is going to come up again too. But is Alolan Raticate something you want to have on your team? Not necessarily. Myself, I'm actually considering just going with neither of these two for my team because I don't have a Last Resort Umbreon. So yeah. Now that that's out of the way, countering the Dark types. What better to use to counter the Dark types than the Charm users? Yeah, Alolan Ninetales and Granbull. Now, as far as the Ferocious Cup goes, Alolan Ninetales is a staple. It's on your team. Alolan Ninetales cannot be replaced, in my opinion, by Granbull. And from what I've experienced looking at different IV spreads, hatched Alolan Ninetales are actually pretty forgiving in the IV department, so don't have to sweat trading for the right IVs too much. But yeah, I don't think Granbull can really replace Alolan Ninetales because Alolan Ninetales has the bulk and the early charge move that it needs to really hammer out a lot of matchups. So, and with the increased tankiness of Alolan Ninetales, it can also hammer down on the Vaporeon, and then also hammers down the electric types with the increased bulk, not dying so quickly like other Fairy type Pokemon that we have here. So if Alolan Ninetales is so good, why would you ever consider Granbull? Well, for one, Granbull will allow you to do a double charm kind of team strat, put extra pressure on these Umbreon boys out there, right? And then on top of that, because Granbull has more charm damage, it's got a higher attack stat, it's actually able to bully the Skuntank, which is awesome, and it's also able to bully the Bibarel. Bibarel beats A9, Bibarel doesn't easily beat the Granbull, and then Vaporeon can beat the Granbull, but Vaporeon doesn't handle A9 so well. Basically, what's going on here is Vaporeon has the earlier charge move, which is nice against the less defensive Pokemon, but Bibarel has the harder hitting charge move that's also early. which helps it get through the Alolan Ninetales. So, a little swag tip there for you. Another advantage to Granbull is that if it gets caught by Nidoqueen, it dies faster. And once again, the reason why dying faster is good is because it makes it so Nidoqueen can't use Earth Power, then just use a Poison Jab, and then whip out another Earth Power right away. Where the alternative, if you were to swap in and get trapped with Alolan Ninetales, Nidoqueen can very much do that. So, very terrifying if your Alolan Ninetales gets trapped by Nidoqueen, less terrifying if your Granbull does, even though both are gonna die. It's interesting how that all works out, but I guess that's that's how it plays out. So we got our all-powerful charm users. What are good counters to them? Well, the best counter overall, what we're seeing, most consistent, most insano counter, is the Nidoqueen. And the reason why Nidoqueen is so insane is because of what I just explained. If your opponent swaps in an Alolan Ninetales, you swap in Nidoqueen, you can just farm it up using Poison Jab damage. You shield the Psyshock, of course, but now you're down a shield. Oh no, doesn't matter. Next Pokemon to come in after you beat down this thing with fast move damage alone, you can whip out Earth Power, Poison Jab like one more time, and then whip out another Earth Power. Or if you got enough HP or you're feeling like it, maybe they're out of shields, you can actually charge up to just a straight up Earthquake after the Earth Power. You will probably have time to do that. So pretty insane as far as that combo goes. Other Pokemon can counter the Fairy types as well. We got the Steel types here, do a really good job of it. The Aggron and the Larion can also farm the Fairy types as well with very little to worry about. But the disadvantage is that their charge moves aren't as insane as the Nidoqueens are. So definitely pick your flavor there. But the Steel types are pretty good alternatives or additions to a team that have a Nidoqueen on it. Then we also have Skuntank down here. And I wouldn't say Skunktank's exactly a direct counter to Charm. It does really good against the Alolan Ninetales, but the Granbull can hammer it down, so a little bit risky there. I think the true advantage to using Skuntank is that it's sort of like a safe switch in a way. You bring in Skuntank, and not a whole lot of things directly want to fight it. There's a lot of things that could maybe beat it, but now, because you swapped it in, you technically have an energy advantage as well. So this thing is just like an ugly thing to fight if you don't have a really good counter to it. Like the Steel types don't mind Skuntank too much, but it's just like one of those things that you can swap into and not immediately lose. Like if you swap in one of these two guys, then a Fairy type's going to come in and just ruin your life. You swap in an Alolan Ninetales, Nidoqueen's going to come in and ruin your life. You swap in a Water type, chances are Electric type's going to come in and ruin your life. So if you have to swap something in, swapping in Skuntank is the least likely Pokemon to ruin your life. Does that mean that you should have Skuntank on every single team you make? Well, absolutely not. Sometimes winning harder is better than having a good option if you expect to be behind. You know what I mean? So, Nidoqueen. Pretty crazy. What beats Nidoqueen really well? Well, it's a ground type Pokemon, so it loses pretty dang hard to the water types. And I'd say the water types overall are an extremely threatening addition to this cup. Basically, if Umbreon didn't exist, the water types would probably have the best neutral matchups in the entire cup. Obviously, they lose hard to the electrics, but the darks lose hard to the fairies, so whatever, man. But the water type's extremely good. Now, as far as the water types go, Bibarel is really good because it has the native Hyper Fang, so it's got neutral coverage against other water type Pokemon, or perhaps a pesky dragon type Pokemon that might show up. So that's pretty useful on the Bib there. And then you have Vaporeon. Now, you could have Vaporeon with the Last Resort, which is also a neutral coverage move to other water type Pokemon, and the Shelgion over here. But Hydro Pump does have its advantages. If you use Hydro Pump and it lands on a Bibarel, you can win that matchup now. Before, it was going to be a loss. Now, it can be a win. On top of that, if Hydro Pump lands on the Umbreon, that can also be a matchup that you could win as well. So Vaporeon is a little bit more versatile in that respect. But going back to the Bib has the neutral coverage, so then it can beat the Vaporeon more consistently than the Vaporeon can beat it. So both have their utility. Both are good for any team comp. You could even use both of them if you're really not sure which one you want to side with. Double water is a good strategy. Then over here we have Suicune, and Suicune is also a water type, but it doesn't have aggressive water gun damage. It mostly functions as a water type off of its charge move Hydro Pump, which is a wicked fast Hydro Pump. but because it's relying on a single bar charge move nonetheless to get its water type damage in, it is a bit less consistent than these guys are. And then on top of that, because it's using Snarl, it's less likely to farm matchups for extra energy to give it advantages in the next fight kind of thing, which these guys can take advantage of. So Suicune, a little bit less consistent water type. If you are thinking about using Suicune, definitely consider pairing it with another water type on your roster of 6. Then finally, we have the water type hard counters, the electric types. Now, featured on the graphic are Cantonian Raichu and Minun, and that's because they have the better matchups against the Umbreon and the Alolan Raticate. Basically, Minun is thick enough and does heavy enough damage where it can overcome these guys. And then the Cantonian Raticate here has Brick Break. Now, Wild Charge does more damage per energy than Brick Break does to Umbreon, so definitely be aware of that. You can't Brick Break your way to victory against Umbreon. Wild Charges will be necessary to overcome it, but Brick Break just kind of obliterates this Alolan Rat guy here. And then on top of that Brick Break, the Steel types, these Steel types that all 3 of them are doubly weak to fighting, yeah, they don't want to deal with Brick Break either, so yeah. Now, if you're worried, Ryan Swag, I don't have the Legacy Thundershock Raichu. What do? Well, Spark isn't all that behind. It's still like kind of as good. Obviously, you won't be able to spam your charge moves as much, but you will be able to chonk down some things with fast move damage alone, which can give you a different kind of flavor of energy advantage that the Thundershock might not offer you. But at the end of the day, I'm feeling you. I don't have it either. I kind of wish I did. But if you don't have it and you don't want to deal with the less energy gaining Spark, should you go with the Minun? To be perfectly honest, I'm not sold on the Minun anymore. Like, if you asked me like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I'd be like, yeah, Minun's great. But Minun does have a complication. And that is, if its IVs are deficient, Umbreon can beat it. And if Umbreon is using Dark Pulse, which, you know, all them double Dark Umbreons out there are definitely using Dark Pulse, well then it can also lose to the Umbreon, making it less consistent. And Minun loses to all the other electric types. So if the only reason why you're really in this club, Minun, is because you can meme on Umbreon more consistently than everything else, but you're no longer consistent at that, should we be powering up Minuns? I don't think so. I think a really good alternative electric type to consider, if you don't want to use either of these two, is Alolan Raichu. Cool thing about Alolan Raichu is that it has a native Thundershock, so it already has the faster charge move, and on top of that, it has Psychic, and Psychic can one-shot the Nidoqueen. You can charge up the Psychic faster than Nidoqueen can charge up to Earth Power, so that could be a nice, chop in the pocket there to harass the Nidoqueen. And then if ground types all of a sudden start to become popular, you also have Grass Knot as an option as well. At the end of the day, though, they are all vulnerable to the double Earth Power shenanigans that Nidoqueen can whip out. And if you don't want to use an electric type on your team, that's perfectly reasonable. Dark types can counter water types. Water types can counter water types. Fairy types can counter water types. So you don't exactly need a water type hard counter to do well in this cup. They just help out. So there you have it, the basics of the Ferocious Cup. Now there are the mold breakers, other options to consider over here on the side. If you want extra details on them or any of the Pokemon mentioned in this video, link in the description again to the Game Press article written by the Lorma. Definitely breaks down a lot of the matchups in like heavy detail. It's really good reading. Now, if this is all very confusing to you, I do have a Ferocious Cup starter pack graphic to just break it down and make making a team simple. The staples, of course, being the Alolan Ninetales, the Skuntank, and maybe the Umbreon. It's up to you if you want to risk going double dark or not. I honestly don't have a solid answer for you right now. But then after that, I'd say these are the only Pokemon you really need to consider if you don't want to get big brain about it. You know, you got the Bibarel, you got the Vaporeon, it highlights their advantages and disadvantages. Nidoqueen, of course, but that Alolan Sandslash can beat the Nidoqueen, do the same kind of job, but it also has other weaknesses as well. We got the 2 Raichus, and then we got Granbull over here. But if you're not satisfied with these picks, then definitely check out Lorma's article and start matching up your own team. And that's the Ferocious Cup. This cup is pretty interesting, I have to say. One thing that really holds this cup back in flavor, in my opinion, is the Last Resort Umbreon situation. If Last Resort Umbreon was banned, or if Umbreon was banned altogether, I think this cup would be way more interesting than what it is. However, the Silph Arena decided to not ban Umbreon, which means they've willingly and intentionally have placed All non-Last Resort Umbreon havers added this advantage. That was their choice specifically, and I really do think it's nonsense. That said, if you don't have Last Resort Umbreon, that doesn't mean that you can't win or have fun with the cup this month. I certainly am going to do my best without the Last Resort Umbreon, and I think we all can too. I think one big point of advantage in this cup, more so than others, is how you manage your energy in the matchups. Do you want to farm up some energy before you swap out? Do you want to swap out right away? What are you swapping out into? And then if your opponent swaps in something, do you want to use 1 shield, 2 shields to try to wear it down so it doesn't have extra health so it can get even more energy on the next matchup? It's all very intricate and complicated. For that reason, I do suggest getting plenty of practice in for this cup. One thing that I use for training, because I don't have all the Pokemon under the sun, and I don't have all the time to schedule matchups with people every single day of my life, is the PvPoke Trainer. It's really good. It really is. Helps you practice the matchups, get used to the flow of battle, and helps you realize which situations you are comfortable to farm in, which ones you really need to swap out in. So definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't already. At any rate, the Ferocious Cup Simplified. If you like this content, you want to see more like it, subscribe to SwagTips. If you got any questions on this content, comment below, let me know what's up, I'll be happy to help you out. And as always, check out the article, really useful.
SwagTips.
One thing I think is super hilarious about this cup though is the fact that some options are better than other ones because they die faster to their counters. Like Alolan Eradicate, but more importantly Granbull, just so they don't get extra energy. I think that's nutty. But that is this kind of cup. so be aware.